Distinguished friends, ladies and gentlemen, it is once again an honor to be here in your country. Every time I am invited to speak here, I return to Mexico with renewed strength. For those of us honest Mexicans, these forums are a breath of fresh air, a way to break through the media siege that the Mexican government has built around any voice that dares to dissent. And believe me, they do listen when I speak in places like this. I know it because the President of Mexico has made it a habit to attack me every time I return from the United States. She calls it treason. She calls it serving foreign interests. I call it proof that the truth, when spoken clearly across border, still has enormous power. Sadly, I must tell you, every time I return here, I bring darker news than before. When I last spoke in the United States, just last month in Austin, Texas, I described what I call a socialist mafiocracy taking root in Mexico, a regime in which authoritarian politics and ever-expanding state and narco-terrorism are fused into a single structure of power. I warned that this was not just another government with a different ideology. It was a project of regime change in my country. Tonight I am here to tell you that this model is consolidating. In the past 2 weeks, 2 events have given the clearest picture yet of what Mexico has become and of what its rulers are willing to do to protect themselves. The first is the case of Sinaloa, where a sitting governor from the ruling party was indicted by the United States Department of Justice on charges of drug trafficking into your country, alongside 9 close collaborators. The Mexican government did not respond as a state committed to the rule of law. It responded as a political shield. It rejected the indictment, slowed cooperation, and again protected narco-politicians from scrutiny. The second is the case of Chihuahua, where an opposition governor who had the courage to dismantle one of the largest synthetic drug laboratories in recent Mexican history is now being threatened with impeachment and even prison for having done so in cooperation with the United States. 2 governors, 2 states, 2 opposite actions from the same president: protection for the narco-aligned and punishment for the anti-narco. That is not a coincidence. That is the architecture of the new Mexican state. Let me begin with the first story, Sinaloa. That is the home state of the Sinaloa cartel, the criminal organization founded by El Chapo Guzman and now led by his sons. One of the cartels that has flooded American streets with fentanyl, the poison that has killed hundreds of thousands of your sons and daughters. For years, many of us, Mexican journalists, activists, and opposition leaders warned that this cartel had reached a political pact with the ruling party, Morena. We warned that the cartel was not merely operating in Sinaloa. It was shaping the political life of the state. There were documented reports of the cartel's involvement in elections, gunmen kidnapping opposition political operators, stealing ballot boxes, intimidating voters, and ordering state police to stand down. For years, prosecutors did nothing. Local courts certified the electoral results. Federal authorities looked the other way. Presidents López Obrador and Sheinbaum both defended the elected governor publicly, and the narco pact held. It took the United States Department of Justice, not the Mexican justice system, to connect the pieces. On April 29, the United States Attorney for the Southern District of New York unsealed an indictment that reads less like a criminal filing and more like a manual on state capture. According to the indictment, the governor met personally with the Sinaloa cartel leaders in meetings guarded by armed men, where they promised electoral support in exchange for access to security and justice institutions. And once they helped win the election, senior state officials received monthly cash payments in exchange for protecting cartel members from arrest and warning them about operations supported by the United States. Even a former municipal police commander is accused of participating in the kidnapping, torture, and murder of a DEA confidential source and a member of his family. The people indicted: a governor, a sitting senator from Morena, the mayor of the state capital, the deputy general attorney, former police chiefs, former public security officials, former cabinet members. This is not a story of isolated corruption. It is the indictment of a system, of a mafiocracy. So how did the President of Mexico respond? She defended them. She demanded irrefutable evidence before taking action, while refusing to act as the extradition treaty requires. She accused the United States of intervention and invoked sovereignty, not to defend Mexico, but to defend the pact with the cartels. Only after intense public pressure did the governor and the mayor finally step aside. But they remain free. They are still in Sinaloa. They have not been extradited. The message from Mexico's president to the United States and to the cartels could not be clearer. The pact holds. Why? Because Sinaloa is not an isolated case. The narco-political alliance extends across many regions of Mexico. To hand those 10 men over to American justice would be to open a Pandora's box that could destabilize the regime itself. President Sheinbaum is not acting from strength. She is acting from fear. She fears what the world might learn about how rotten the regime truly is. She fears that the cartels, once betrayed, will turn on those who helped build the arrangement. She feels the box will never close once it's opened. But do not mistake fear for restraint. A frightened authoritarian is often the most dangerous kind. And that brings me to the second story, Chihuahua. While the regime moves to shield its allies in Sinaloa, it has decided to punish an opposition governor who chose to fight the cartels rather than accommodate them. Her name is Maru Campos. 3 weeks ago, her government dismantled the largest synthetic drug laboratory found in Mexico in recent memory. By any reasonable standard, that was a victory in the war against the cartels, a blow against the same networks that flood American cities with poison every day. But the celebration did not last. Hours later, a vehicle carrying Mexican officers and 2 American citizens went off a cliff on the road back. All 4 died, including the 2 Americans. And this is where the mask fell. Instead of supporting the governor in her fight against organized crime, the federal government turned its anger on her. They denounced the United States for working directly with subnational authorities. It accused Governor Campos of betrayal. Morena legislators have now formally requested her impeachment. Some have even threatened to have her jailed for treason. Let me be very clear about what this means. The President of Mexico is shielding a governor accused by United States courts of conspiring with the Sinaloa cartel to traffic fentanyl into your country. At the same time, she is moving against a governor who actually destroyed a fentanyl laboratory with United States support. That is the moral inversion of the Mexican state. That is what asymmetric justice looks like under a narco regime. The main issue is principle. The issue is proportionality. The issue is priorities. The issue is which side of this war the Mexican federal government is on. Are they with the law enforcement or with the cartel? Clearly, President Sheinbaum and her party are aligned with the cartels. What I have described is not a series of scandals. It is the emerging political order of a country of 130 million people that shares 2,000 miles of border with you, that is your largest trading partner, and that sits at the geographic and economic heart of North America. A new regime with 3 dangerous components. First, state capture by criminal organizations, not infiltration, capture. Cartels do not only bribe public officials anymore, they install them. They do not negotiate with police, they command them. Second, the systematic dismantling of institutional checks. A judicial reform that replaced independent federal judges with elected ones, including former cartel defense lawyers. Laws that criminalize criticism and the weaponizing of justice against opposition members. And third, an ideological alliance with the international authoritarian axis. Mexico's current government has aligned itself politically and rhetorically with Havana, Caracas, and increasingly with Moscow and Beijing. And as the 2 cases I have described show, there is now an increasingly aggressive anti-American discourse inside Morena against anyone who dares to talk to you or cooperate with you. And for those of us who oppose this regime, we face a double threat from the cartels and from their allies in government. Last year alone, more than 40 candidates for public office were murdered in Mexico. Most of them aspiring mayors, most of them in regions where cartels had already decided who would be allowed to govern. Carlos Manso, a brave mayor who stood up to the cartel and corrupt politician, was executed in public in front of his family. But what I most want you to hear tonight is this: there's still hope. Millions of Mexicans are exhausted by this narco state. Mothers of the disappeared walk our streets demanding justice. Independent journalists, at enormous personal risk, continue to publish. Honest local officials exist. Civic organizations still breathe. The opposition has not been wiped out yet. For the first time in a long time, fear is beginning to change sides. For the first time, the politicians who merged with the cartels, who believed themselves untouchable, now wonder whether they will spend the rest of their lives in a prison in the United States. For the first time, the truth has found a path. To Mexicans, the choice is becoming increasingly clear. One Mexico of decent, hardworking, principled people, and another Mexico of the corrupt, the violent, and the unpunished narco-politicians. This is our generational battle. It is a moral battle, a battle of right against wrong. It is a battle only Mexicans can ultimately win. But we cannot win it alone. To my American friends, I ask for three things. First, speak clearly about the nature of the regime you are dealing with. This is not a normal democratic government with which you simply disagree. It is an authoritarian project that has captured significant portions of the Mexican state, dismantles institutional checks, and aligns with terrorists and anti-American powers. Naming things accurately is the first step in confronting them. Second, continue using the legal tools at your disposal within the bounds of treaties and bilateral agreements to bring Mexican narco-politicians to justice. Under current conditions, only the United States can credibly prosecute those who work with the cartels in Mexico. The Rocha indictment must not be the end, it must be the beginning. Third, do not abandon us Mexicans that are still fighting. Independent journalists, victims' organizations, honest local officials, governors like Maru Campos, who chose the brave path of doing what is right under enormous pressure. We are proof that another Mexico is still possible. Do not let us be silenced. We are not asking you to fight our war for us. We are asking that you don't look away while it is being fought. One final word. The Rocha indictment is, without exaggeration, the most far-reaching political criminal accusation ever brought against a sitting Mexican government. It is a wound to my country's pride. But it is also, paradoxically, a gift, because it forces us to see clearly what this regime is turning Mexico into. A regime that protects its narco governors and prosecutes its anti-narco governors. This is not a democracy in difficulty. It's a criminal state. We in the Mexican opposition are ready to do our part to reverse this. We are prepared to stand. What we ask of you is simple. Stand with us. May God bless our countries. May God guide us. And may God help us free ourselves from the depraved narco-terrorist left. Thank you very much.